Streaming has started, so yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's live session. I'm Rahima Wasti, your marketing executive at Line for Dev, and I'm thrilled to have here with us today our esteemed founder, Mr. Philip Cutting. We're going to dive deep into the fascinating world of emerging markets, exploring the risks and opportunities that come with investing in them. Philip, it's great to have you here.
Thank you, dear. I'm excited to talk about emerging markets. And because it's such a challenging field, but so lucrative, I want to kind of broach the topic at kind of a surface level and have fun with some of our audience and hopefully give them some insights and maybe some warnings and maybe some inspiration along the way to help them be successful. So I'm really looking forward to our call on this one.
Same here. Let's start with the basics. What exactly are emerging markets and why should investors be interested in them?
All right, so emerging markets are countries that are in the process of rapid industrialization and economic growth. They often have higher growth potential compared to developed markets, say the US, most of Europe, for example. And due to their expanding customer bases, increasing urbanization and improving of the infrastructure, they're suddenly a interesting and lucrative opportunity. Think of countries like China, India, Brazil, especially, right? These countries have immediate opportunities that are immense, but it's critical to understand that there are underlying dynamics that are in play, and we have to kind of understand these a little bit before we take the risk and jump in there. In case our nest egg is in danger, we want to be a little extra prepared when we go into markets outside of our standard culture.
Right. I definitely completely agree to that. And definitely the potential is vast, but so are the risks. Speaking of which, let's move on to the economic growth of potential of these markets. How can you shed some light on the economic growth potential of emerging markets and how investors can capitalize on this?
Sure. So the economic growth potential in emerging markets is primarily driven by factors like demographic trends, upcoming demographic trends, right? Technology advancements, increasing foreign investments, and a change in both availability of resources and in mindsets. So it's often it's kind of like a generational change also that opens this up, or you're looking at utilizing previously unacceptable or unavailable opportunities. So for instance, India's tech industry is booming. It's offering numerous opportunities for investors.
Yeah.
However, it's essential to do some really thorough research and understand the market trends to capitalize on those opportunities effectively. So there's that balance between managing the new opportunity with making sure you really understand how the trend is in that particular culture.
Definitely. That certainly is very interesting. I also believe that being aware of political and regularity landscape is. So could you elaborate on the political and regularity risk associated with investing in emerging markets?
Oh goodness. So this is interesting. You guys know I'm American, right? You know, star-blooded and everything. And I've had the opportunity to travel the world. Many of you know that I was in the military for a while, and I've gotten the opportunity, thanks to Uncle Sam and thanks to business and thanks to just having a family that's very open-minded, that I've been able to see a lot of the world in amazingly different ways, right? So what I've come to realize is that the politics that we are used to may have nothing to do with the politics of where we want to do business in emerging markets. And this is probably one of the biggest risks, is not kind of understanding it or underestimating the effect of how they communicate and operate and by they I mean the market that we're
Yeah.
interested in penetrating.
Yeah.
Right. So political and regulatory risk are really significant factors to consider. And these markets can be unpredictable with
Mhm.
changes in governments and politics. And even in America, we've recently had a lot of volatility in our political picture. And we're kind of seeing what it is, not, in, so-called third world or developing nations,
Yeah.
because we see that's how one government can come and do one thing. And then immediately the next government can turn around, undo everything, and create a
Exactly.
new process and a new uh, political structure. That's great because there's so much opportunity in that, but there's also the other side of the coin where there's risks, right? So these markets can be unpredictable, and with changes in government policies, corruption, right? Thank God in America we don't have any corruption. We recently had the most fair and appropriate election in history, so that's amazing,
Brilliant.
right? And political instability can be a real factor. So
Mhm.
look at the politics involved, but also look at their cycle of elections, and if they're consistent, if they're if they're frequent, right? Because we're in America are used to elections every 2 years for local stuff, and for the big stuff every 4 or 6 years, right? And then we also have lifetime appointments, and
Oh,
it's
right.
pretty exciting okay, it's a lot to understand. To just understand American politics is a lot. So
Mhm.
understanding the emerging markets is another challenge layer on top of that. So I would kind of say before you jump into it, talk to some of the older people in that community, talk to some of the younger people in that community. You're going to find there's a very different perspective on how they see the world. And both of those perspectives are super important. If you
Absolutely.
know the demographics for your target market, right,
Mhm.
for your target market, you want to talk to them specifically, right? So it's possible that your particular target market in America is 25 to 55 Gen Xers. No,
Okay.
no, I'm wrong on that. Okay, I'm wrong on that, right? But
All right.
you might be dealing with primarily millennials in America, but you might find that in the foreign markets, those same values are appreciated by not the uh 30 to 40-year olds, but by the 60
Mhm.
to 80 years olds. Who knows,
Oh,
right?
right.
It may not be that correlation, but you might really be surprised on who's appreciating your 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 value proposition in foreign markets.
Yeah.
So, but back to how it's coordinated in politics, you have to kind of survey those different
Mhm.
demographics to see how they see your value proposition. But also you have to understand the political scheme in the cycle of where you're trying to penetrate and see how it applies.
Absolutely, that sounds very interesting, Phil. Staying informed is definitely the key. Let's talk about currency risk and exchange rate volatility. These impact investments in emerging markets now.
Okay. This is interesting. So currency exchange is always volatile, and
Mhm.
we're blessed that the American economy is fairly stable compared to the rest of the world.
Mhm.
Also, we find that there's other currencies that are also very stable, and there's other currencies tied to the gold standard. And we want to look at whichever currency kind of makes sense. And in the end,
Mhm.
you can reduce the risk of currency fluctuation by how you immediately process those payments and how you play with those. So with apps, it's you most of the platforms, and it depends on your scenario on how you're deploying your app or your website, right? So if it's a website, you can do anything you want, right? But if it's an app,
Exactly.
Yeah, I love. So this is one reason I recommend starting with a web app versus a mobile app,
Uh-huh.
because web apps you have full control over it. So you can use Stripe, you can use PaySafe, you can use PayPal or Payoneer or any kind of system you can
Exactly.
think of,
Yeah.
right? And many countries have their own payment system that they're totally locked into just by the cultural perspective, but also
Mm-hmm.
by the just also by the need of their community. So it's in Nigeria, you're going to have a very different payment culture versus in Sweden,
Okay.
versus America, versus Ireland, versus Greenland,
Absolutely.
right? Are there
Yeah.
people in Greenland? Good question. So, um, but currency risk and exchange rates volatility can really affect your profitability, and you have to look at what your break even point is and
Okay.
how you can penetrate certain markets and how those
Mm-hmm.
payments are going to apply. So it's a process. This is a business process of finding your ability to predict how much a customer is worth in general, and then you're going to have to field study this going into foreign markets and see where your assumptions in previous markets are going into this. And if you're doing a new app, it's
Mm-hmm.
challenging because you have to do this from the beginning without data, and um, and you have to deal with the volatility of where your payment system comes from and the volatility in their market. And sometimes it depends on your mission, right? So
It does.
I've had clients where they're nonprofit and their goal is penetration, right? Market
Okay.
penetration, I should have said. And they don't really care about profit, but there is a return on investment defined by them, and that return on investment might be views, hours on the app, or influence in the market, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a purpose of an app isn't to make money, but it's to influence the culture, to provide health and medical support, to provide wellness, all kinds of value propositions. And you have to make sure you know what that is and to understand your returns on that and based off. And when you're dealing with your developers, this is super important
Yeah.
because we developers generally have a focus on a particular market, and we come in two flavors. One
Mm-hmm.
flavor is I'll do exactly what the client says should do, right? I'm an amazing code monkey. I can program 10,000 lines per second, right? I'm amazing. The other kind of developer, and normally these tend to be agencies and shops because of the experience,
Mm-hmm.
is they're trying to figure out the business value proposition, right? How does this make sense for the business? If they ask me to do this, does this make sense? Right? These tend to be more advanced, more mature
Exactly.
developers. And if your value proposition or your return on your investment is different than what's normally expected, it's hard for you to understand that. And this is why it's important to do a good discovery, right? This is
Right.
I'm going back to my process, which is to start with a good discovery process. Make sure you filter out all the reasons for doing the project, all your motivations, and the stakeholders' values. But going back to the currency concept, is you have to just understand that one day you might be looking at saying $100 of X in 1 year. If I'm making
Mm-hmm.
$100 from a client in this
Right.
currency, it might be
Mm-hmm.
worth 10 cents in three
Exactly.
months. So this is volatility. We've seen times in history. Iran currently is a funny example. Turkey
Mm-hmm.
is another example of currencies that are taking massive depreciations. And sometimes you can say, hey, is my client base going to be affected by volatility in the currency? Can I peg it to the dollar, or do I have to peg it to their currency to make sure that it's affordable? These are all kind of huge questions that go into looking at how you're going to monetize your app. Who's your users? Is it general users? Maybe it's for government, maybe it's for companies.
Okay.
It's really a fun challenge when you start analyzing your market segment. So
Yeah,
just
those were some good words. Yeah.
thanks, dear.
Continue, please.
No, all I was going to say is that when you're looking at your market segments, that's
Mm-hmm.
going to determine how and which currency you can peg um, to play with that. Apple has
Okay.
different ways to do this. You can go in there. So for Apple, right, you can go in there and you can either allow it to automatically adjust currencies, or you can adjust it yourself. And I think it's important to plan ahead how you want to structure your payment system based off of the market that you're trying to penetrate.
Well, those were some like real good points, Phil. Now let's shift our gears and discuss the sectoral opportunities and emerging markets. Where do you see the most potential?
Okay, so there's several there's several sectors that show significant potential currently. Today, I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at technology, healthcare, renewable energy, and front and in developing market construction, right?
Okay.
So they tend to, in developing markets, tend to enjoy rapid growth in
Mm-hmm.
the engineering field, civil engineering field, roads,
Right.
buildings, commercial space, residential space, right? They
Absolutely.
tend to go together. So look at these trends and enjoy that trend, right?
Mm-hmm.
I've had clients that created apps that serve the concrete industry. And when they
Mm-hmm.
nail the right timing, they make amazing money. If they come in too late, right, they hit the tail end of that, and it doesn't go well. So look, if you know your target industry, look at where it is in the cycle and plan for that, right? And if you're trying to, this goes back to the issue, if you're trying to gain market share,
Mm-hmm.
there's kind of fixed values, linear values of how you take over existing market share. And it's a different
Okay.
concept of how you try to take advantage of emerging markets. So look into, make sure you know ahead of time what you're trying to do, and don't try to ride both. Don't try to be, I'm, I'm going into an existing market and pulling that, but I'm also trying to gain existing growth markets. They actually are very different. I've never seen them connect. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't
Okay.
happen, right? But I've never seen
Mm-hmm.
them run in parallel. So it's going to be
Okay.
part of your market research to see what it is. And if you're finding that, here's a fun thing. If you think your product satisfies every customer need, you need to go back to the drawing board and look for more challenges, more needs, more desires of your client, of your market segment, and really see
Okay.
if you're given all the delivery that they need. Because I've never seen, and this is a standard business practice concept. I've never seen any solution that satisfies everybody. Right. So if you're
Okay.
feeling like your product satisfies everybody, you probably need to dig a little deeper to make sure you got a
Mm-hmm.
full image of what you have going on. And
Definitely.
that's just well, that was a fun tangent. Sorry. So going back to the sectors, let's look at AI and fintech. Right.
Mm-hmm.
We have right now a massive change in the way we use technology with AI. And so many people are applying this to financial technologies that there's
Mm-hmm.
people that are making money just by using AI, letting it go do its job and kind of having fun directing it, right?
Right.
There's going to be guys that in this year, 2024, are able to marry these two concepts, apply them to particular markets and cultures in emerging markets, and really make some amazing profit. Right. I can't wait to have some clients say, I want to make this financial app. I want to use AI. I understand this culture here, and I'm going to go right after this market. You can, one another opportunity right now is to
Mm-hmm.
is to take existing successful apps, right?
All right.
See how you can apply AI, and you have to really focus, because all these existing apps, they're also trying to apply AI, right? So focus on a particular value chain and go after that, right? And see if you can create a tool, if you can create something that's going to be bought out, or it's something that's hard to replicate, right? There's a lot of ways to provide value that makes it hard for you to be replaced, and see how you can go in and take over a segment of that particular market. Similarly, renewable energy is still a huge issue. In India, it's amazing to see what they're doing. Pakistan, I've seen amazing growth in renewable energy, not because that the technology is new, but because of pricing instability, availability instability, right? If you're a company that's doing renewable energies right now, look at some of these markets where they have changed governments, right? And seriously, it happens every 2 to 4 years everywhere in the world, sometimes more often, right?
Yeah.
Look at some of these markets and say, hey, is there a foot place for me to take over? I'm such a fan of renewable energy. As you guys, if you've heard me talk before, almost like every month, 2 or 3 times I'm talking about it. So I really encourage it, but I also don't want to see people going too far and getting rid of standard technology, like their diesel truck, right? Please don't get rid of your diesel truck. Don't hate me for my diesel truck. Don't hate me because I don't have it right now, right? I really want to get another one. Just saying.
All right.
So there it is. Political instability and when you're looking at the availabilities in sectors, they play together. That's,
Okay.
I think, what I'm trying to say.
All right, that was like really fascinating, Phil. Another area I'm particularly interested in is infrastructure development. How important it is, and what should investors look out for in it?
Okay, so infrastructure development is essentially a foundational structure in your app development and business development. And when we're looking at the emergence of these growth economies, it's going to include transportation, energy, transportation, telecommunications, right? All amazing factors that we can really jump into. And again, there's a lot of apps out there that are existing, right? So take those and learn from them, right? But apply them to the particular culture that you're looking to support, right? Okay. So sometimes it goes back to the concept of seeing what already works and then seeing why hasn't already been applied here, right? Why didn't they just take this app and just go right there? Maybe it's a language barrier. Maybe it's a cultural barrier. Maybe it's just the way that they expect to be served and overcoming this. And sometimes you can just do marketing to overcome some of these barriers. And I'm kind of a firm believer that good marketing overcomes almost all evils. So this is why I'm also a big fan of getting that MVP out there, getting feedback, and seeing how you can target your audience in a way that's really going to support them. And when you're dealing with these emerging markets, it's really critical to go out there in as small piece as possible to get feedback so that you can make sure you're on track before you spend a lot of money.
Definitely, Phil. Stability and long-term plans are definitely very essential. Let's touch on market access and capital flows next. How do these factors influence investments? What are the key considerations regarding market access and capital flows in emerging markets? What's your take on that?
Yeah, so market access can be challenging due to a few factors, right? One is regulatory barriers, bureaucratic political challenges, right? There might be corruption. There might be people that are just standing in your way. They say you can't do this. We've seen a lot of companies that started the scooter movement and then got shut down just because it wasn't handled well or wasn't received well in communities, right? yeah, there's really a lot of challenges, and you never know where it can come from. Capital flows are also a really big issue, right? So there's two things. One is capital flows from the client side, and the other one is how you can get finance for your
Mm-hmm.
app if you need to get over a bit of a hurdle. So if
Exactly.
you're dealing locally in your
Mm-hmm.
existing market, it's fairly easy to get financing because governments are looking to support companies. You can get loans. You can show value, right? And it's right there. Every banker or underwriter loves having something they can look at with a local value proposition that they can push up and make some kind of excuse to finance. When it's far away, it's really hard to say that I have a lot of value, right? It's like,
Right.
okay, cool. Maybe you have value to them, but I don't know if you have value to us, the guys with cash.
Exactly.
So keep that in mind, and just be prepared for those fluctuations that are natural and maybe unpredictable to you. So it goes back to doing your research, making sure you hire an expert in that industry, making sure you do some good case studies and evaluations before you really spend much money. Do a really good discovery process, right? Uh, if you're doing a discovery process in your local market that you're familiar with in culture, it's one thing. You can expect to pay twice as much in a market that you're not familiar with to make sure that
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get hurt on that. And it's a very different kind of discovery process that requires both the standard discovery of how to do this, the value proposition, the business value proposition, what's expected in the app, and also the whole cultural and political landscape and market accesses and challenges that you can expect to have under that. And it's a challenge, right? But don't be afraid to jump into it. I know I
Okay.
sound like kind of negative on this, but the profit that if you do it well, there's so much money that you can make, and the rapid growth and the ability to take over an existing market is really hard to resist.
Absolutely. Building local partnerships are definitely very necessary. Now, let's discuss cultural and social considerations. We're going to hop onto that. And how do these impact investments? How important are cultural and social factors when investing in emerging markets?
So, understanding cultural and social dynamics are vital. These factors can influence the consumer behavior, business practices, regulatory environments, and expectations from, and call it local administrators or attorneys or judges or you name it, right? And
Mhm.
for instance, in countries with strong community ties, social acceptance of business can
Yeah.
significantly impact the success. And investors should be engaged with local communities and
Mhm.
also kind of respect cultural nuances. It's
Definitely.
very easy for us to kind of disregard differences in cultures when
Mhm.
we are really only familiar with ours. I find some people are really good at this and some people struggle with this.
Yeah, that is actually very true. Representing cultural nuances, definitely the only key. Before we wrap up, let's hop on to the questions which we got from our audience. Would you mind taking a look at YouTube, and we're gonna answer some questions from our audience, and then we're gonna hop on to LinkedIn as well.
Awesome. Okay. Give me 1 second to pull that up.
Sure.
You guys forgive me. I'm an old man, I guess, and trying to monitor everything at one time.
Definitely, you're not.
Okay, let's start with LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Okay. Question is with the impressive growth rates in emerging markets, should I start learning new languages for my next investment? Oh, good question. So, as far as learning languages,
Mhm.
I I love it and I don't like it at the same time. And
Okay.
here's why I love it. Like learning different languages, it's great. It's going to help you be more adaptive and
Mhm.
more able to understand the culture so that you can really see if it's a good fit. But the time it takes to learn a language and to learn the nuances unless you're like a polyglot, right? I don't encourage it in the business sense, because you're going to have such a better result by doing some interviews, releasing an MVP, doing some initial case studies and some surveys, versus taking the time to learn the language and then learn the nuance and then trying to interact directly. So because today it's so easy to use apps that help you translate, and
Mhm.
it's so easy just to hire somebody. They can go out and do some live interviews for you, and to start kind of getting that dialogue going in those case studies. That I
Yeah.
would rather go faster, pay somebody a little bit of money versus the time to learn those languages. Because if you have a good idea and you're focused on emerging markets, there's not just one emerging market, there's a
Yeah.
lot of them, right? And when you're looking at these emerging markets,
Mhm.
maybe the maybe they're not going to have such a big population base that you're not going to have to also go to other areas in other emerging markets. So if you had to learn 5 or 20 different language models and that was your basis, your value proposition, I think you're missing the point, because I would rather have you focus on the product, working on the leadership skills of getting out there and asking the right questions and getting feedback and delegating some of that. Because as your app becomes successful, you're going to have to learn how to delegate anyways, right?
Yeah.
It's a
Totally agree
key
with that.
Yeah, you've seen this, right? You've worked on plenty of projects where they start to get successful, and all
Mhm.
of a sudden, the the owner has to go from "I'm going to do everything because I nobody can do it like I can" to "Wow, it's overwhelming. How do I lead people into this?" Right. So
Mhm.
if you there's a balance between understanding that you have to do some work in different stages, and build the ability to delegate, and seeing where you should delegate in the first place. What does it take, like an average person to learn a foreign language? I would say 3,000 hours minimum, right? If you looking at trying to learn 3,000 words, which is the base vocabulary, then you're going to spend 3 to 10,000 hours learning the language and the structure
Yeah.
and practicing it. That 3 to 10,000 hours, if you do just your regular job, you can pay, even if you're working at McDonald's in California at $23 an hour, right? You can pay a lot of people to do
Very true.
these surveys for you and to do the hard work and learn how to run a business in the process. So the on the other side of that is I run into the problem where people like, I don't want to do this business because I can't fully automate it, everything, right? And
Yeah.
then I'm like, okay, yeah, you're not Apple. You can't fully automate everything. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do this business. It means you should look at what value proposition, work on it some, and continue to develop those values, the value proposition that you're delivering to your customer segment, so that you can also learn the process, but also you can develop that value proposition and results. And over time, you're going to go from, hey, uh, done for you, to done, you do it yourself, right? Those are the extremes. One extreme is I
Right.
do everything for you in business. The other extreme is you do everything and I just give you my tools to do it.
Mhm.
And it's hard to sometimes jump right into the, hey, you got to do everything, I'm going to give you the tools, right? So don't be afraid to do the hard work up front, knowing that you're going to evolve your sales ability as an entrepreneur, or even employee, right? Same thing, right? Nobody starts off with all the skills in the world. I mean, look at me, right? When we started these interviews, you were amazing, and over time, I stopped tripping over myself so much, right? So the it's a learning process, and you grow into it. And I think not to try to do everything yourself. And while I spun around that question on a tangent, I think it's important to try to develop the business practice so that you
Mhm.
can have a whole business later on. Okay, let me see. Um, Question is, how do you navigate the maze of market access and capital flows Is it more like playing chess or solving a Rubik cube? So to me, playing chess and the Rubik's cube is kind of the same. With the Rubik's cube, you have a pattern that you can work through. Chess is recognizing changing patterns and seeing how you can encourage the direction. And when you're looking at navigating the maze of markets and capital flows, I think it's almost the same as trying to come up with a good pricing strategy where you're at. So to pull it back to apps, mobile apps, there's a way to start first, show value, right? So you create an app, you test it out, you get your MVP. The next thing is you put up a payment wall so that you get paid. The next thing, or simultaneously, is to create a registration process where you walk people through, this is the value of the app, this is some information I need from you, this is some further information to help you be successful. Now this is the payment wall, and now you can get the value of this. We already have built up the user base, we built up how we help people, and we know the whole value proposition. Exactly. So the third part of this, after you've built that registration flow, the purchase flow, and the paywalls, is start split testing. And as you split test, you're going to learn how to rapidly change your pricing if need be, how to offer promotions, how to see trends in the market. It's very hard to do out of the gates. And if you have done a lot of research up to it, sometimes you can do it, right? With the proper funding, you can go and jump right into it, right? But you still want, and by jumping into it, I mean jumping into the process where you have the app, the registration flow, and the paywall, and the split testing, so that you can quickly collect data and see how it's going to affect in certain markets. And then in that case, you can have a lot of companies have like 2 or 3 guys that are constantly playing with the pricing and looking at different markets and seeing how promotions affect with the marketing. So it's more than just learning how to capitalize the app well. It's also looking how you market the app and seeing where you get your value and how to chase those dollars. It's like an inverse funnel when it comes to that. The hardest part is, getting the initial customer in. Then you try to see how to provide value to that. Really, this is it sounds like, it's a long tail value proposition, right? It's how do I start giving value that gives them value over the long term? This is one way to look at it. Of course, the other way, there's other ways, like how do I get quick cash? How do I instantly get the money out of them that I can? But every business needs to look how to increase the value of their customers by providing more value, by making sure that they are delivering results, and that they just don't gain all the value up front, but how it builds value over time. Industries like education really suffer with this, because if you have an app where you're teaching people how to do a skill, you have all the value of that app up until the point they learn that skill, and then it's worth nothing to the client, right? Absolutely. But if you built in long tail value, like a community, like continued updates in the education system about market research, right? All these things that continue to add long-term value, you expand that funnel of the value that you provide to customers, rather than you going from a big value up front to a zero value.
Absolutely. Well, that was fascinating, and your take on that was good.
Thank you, dear. Let's see. Culture differences can be a real puzzle. Have you ever had a moment where you realized you totally misunderstood a local custom? How did that impact your investment?
Interesting.
Maybe easier on this is to explain talk about some times when I was just an idiot and didn't understand anything. So in America, we have like a democratic system, and we almost currently have like families, but sometimes a family is like just, genetics, right? Maybe we like them, maybe we
Mhm.
don't. It's cool, right?
Mhm.
The best thing is if I have a happy wife and a brother that loves me, and we talk, and I talk to my parents every other day, or as much as my wife can handle, and vice versa. And then that's great, right? But then there's tribal communities where the tribe is important. There's a leadership in a small community. There's 150 people that I know my whole life, and there's leaders, and there's a clear process of how they think and the expectations they hand down, and a very rigid community concept. And I could never think of moving. Whereas in America, I'm like, I cannot imagine not moving, right? It's like I can move for a new job, or if my wife makes me angry, or if my kid goes to college, or something like that, right? Or just if like I prefer to have better weather. But this is one of those things that I've seen learned around the world, that not everybody's like that, right? And I can't, in the beginning I couldn't imagine, because I'm like, you just go out in this. But then I'm like,
Mhm.
okay, cool. I as I get older, I'm like, okay, now I see the value of having the same group of people around you that you grow up with, to have meaningful relationships, right? Now, maybe I
Yeah.
don't really understand those values, right? Because I do like to travel, I like to have some close friends, but I couldn't imagine being locked down, right? But it doesn't matter that I understand that. What matters is that somebody else does, and I go through the exercise of trying to understand them rather than trying to uh, apply my cultural concepts. And it doesn't come natural, I think, to anybody, or at least it
Mhm.
doesn't to me. And maybe that's because I'm a pain in the ass. But it's a growing process, I think, for everybody, and it's a healthy one. Knowing that and going into emerging markets, it's extremely critical that you're super open to that. You're open to
Absolutely.
understanding yourself, and you'll learn a
Mhm.
lot about yourself when you go into emerging markets. You're going to be like, I never realized there was a thought process different than mine, or a language
Exactly
different
what
than mine,
happens.
right?
Yeah.
It's the first time I went to Bulgaria, Cyrillic language. I'm like, what is this stuff? I couldn't read anything, right? I'm like, okay, I get Greek, I get Latin, Latin based languages, I get
Right.
even Germans, right? But
Mhm.
this is something insane, and didn't make any sense, right? And I haven't even gone to Asia yet, right? What My mind's going to explode when I go to Asia. I can't wait, right? I'm just going to go, and I'm going to like pop, right? It's going to be so much fun. So, uh, it goes back to, if you want to go into emerging market and if you haven't done it before, maybe a
Mhm.
great idea is to go there and just talk to people, and to bring some flowers, and just to see how it's received, right? Take what you expect to be acceptable, and see if it sticks there, right? You might be pleasantly surprised, or you might be embarrassed, and just be ready to roll with it.
Oh, well, that was definitely something that you said.
um Let's see. Okay, so thank you, dear. We love a good success story. Can you share a tale of unexpected triumph in an emerging market, um, that made you think, "Wow, I should really write a book about this"? Oh, what a good one! There is in India, they didn't have phones for a long time. They didn't have the culture,
Mhm.
and I'm not sure, is it the past decade or something? It's fairly recently, where they were able to tie in local funding with the ability to bring in phone carriers and devices, and low end devices, and go from people almost not having a home phone to almost everybody having a mobile phone. And this changing culture, it was such an amazing twist, that I think this one is a great example of how to write a book. If you go further back in history, right, look at the railroad in America, look at women in aviation, look at how we look at the feminist movement, right? You may appreciate it or not, but look at some of these amazing movements out there, how they change the world for good or bad, and try to take lessons
Absolutely.
from it. I'm ordering the book Rules for Radicals. After I read that book, maybe I'll have something more to share on this one. So
All right. We would love to hear that from you.
yeah, I'm not sure if I want to, but that would be fun. Let's see. Diversification sounds smart, but does it ever feel like you're spreading yourself too thin? How do you
Mhm.
balance being cautious with going all in? Hmm. Noman always comes up with good questions. Um, I think I look at it in a different way. I love diversification when it's fitting the value proposition of the company and therefore product that we're trying to build. I don't like diversification just for the case of bringing
Right.
chaos, right? And diversification can really bring in chaos. If you listen to Warren Buffett, if you really listen to Warren Buffett, he hates diversification, right? He does it
Mhm.
because he has so much money that he has to figure out how to spend it. But he's really made his money by focusing on particular markets that he was able to really learn well and to control. And through that, he didn't grow through diversification, but grow through focus. So I like to take some lessons on that and not spread myself too thin, to have a focus, to get really good at certain things. And once I've mastered that, then I go on to diversification. But and also for developers, right? If you're a programmer, here's where you can fail. You can say, I'm going to diversify my language base. I'm going to learn Java and C++ and Go
Mhm.
and Kotlin and Swift and Objective C, right? And this is a
Yeah.
good concept if you're in college and you're trying to understand computer science. But if you're trying to make a career as a programmer, it's ridiculous. I won't hire you, right? If you're like, hey, I'm
Mhm.
pretty good at 30 different languages, but I've never really created anything amazing, but I really want to come here and make something amazing. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm not very interested because while you are obviously have a base of diversity, you have no depth, right? And I want to see
Mhm.
depth out of you, because I need you to be good at something. So until you get good at something, don't go for diversity. Go
Mhm.
for the ability to understand something really well. Now, there is diversity inside organizations, like bringing in women, bringing in different cultural perspectives, bringing in, all kinds of spiritual beliefs, right? And it all goes back to, can they align with the vision? Is it something that they can get on the page with you? Because if they go in there with the objective to be an advocate for their particular beliefs and it doesn't align with what you're trying to achieve, you're going to basically be hiring people to shoot you in the foot. So to pull that back just a little bit, I'd
Uh-huh.
say the the best success I've had with diversification is when we are on the same page. And my
Mhm.
biggest failures is when I didn't really set the expectation and there's a lot of chaos and it wasn't healthy for them and it wasn't healthy for the project that I was trying to do. It's sad. Every once in a while, it's rare now, but there have been a few times I've had to restart a project because just it wasn't a good alignment, and that is a terrible thing. It causes delays. My biggest goal nowadays is not to let that happen, and to avoid that, to make sure that I put the right team with the right project, that I have the right concept, and it's even in the first place, it's right for me, and I'm going to be the right partner for the clients. Because if I'm not the right partner,
Okay.
then I don't want to set them up for failure. The whole thing is set them up for success. So, uh, I hope I answered that question.
Right.
And I think that's all. Is
All
that all
right.
for LinkedIn?
Yeah, that is all for now. We're gonna move on to YouTube. We've got some questions for you on YouTube, and one of them says, "How do you hedge against currency risk in volatile markets?"
So the way you hedge against currency risk in markets,
Mm-hmm.
to me, is quickly take the money and put it into a stable currency. Money
Mm,
today is way better than money in the future, right? So I always want to get paid today versus getting paid in the future, unless the terms are just amazing, right?
that's not.
But you can never predict volatility, right? You can say there's
Mhm.
obvious volatility, there's traditional volatility, right? But there's a lot of things that can change. So money today is really king. So a lot of the systems that we have out there will take that payment and either automatically convert it for you or hold it into an account in that
Okay.
currency, right? And if it's holding the money in that account in the currency, then you can kind of play with the forex and see when's a good time or a bad time to trade. Again, those are personal choices, and just try to figure out either you can try to play it. I haven't seen really anybody do it, so my advice is immediately or once a month transfer it into your base currency that's is protected for you or is a larger, more stable currency. USD is a good one. Euro is probably another good one. There's some currencies I don't really understand, like BRICS. I don't even know if it's a currency yet, but I understand it's coming up. Maybe it's gold or commodities. Maybe you just take the money right away and put it into real estate. I do love real estate, but I don't recommend doing that if you don't have the proper nest egg to support it, right? I also don't like fake versions of commodities, right? So like
Mhm.
there's not REITs, but you could buy on the stock market like a fake
Exactly.
version of
Yeah.
gold that actually doesn't have gold, but it follows the gold line. If it's not
Mhm.
actually holding gold, it's not a commodity to me.
Yeah, that's actually right. It's kind of stupid to me as well. Okay, how do you identify which emerging markets have the most potential for growth and which ones are too risky?
I don't know. I don't know. Um, when I'm looking at a market,
Mhm.
I don't know that I would spend a lot of time saying out of what is there 162 nations, right? Out of 150 countries, is this the best one to go into? I don't
Mhm.
think so, right? There's some lists that you can say, hey, these are top trending industries, these are emerging markets. I
Yeah.
would I would take a look at one or two or three, try to figure out which are the best three real quick, and then I try to narrow it down to the best one that makes sense for me, and do some research in that one. If it's good, go for it, right? And then take after you've built up your product, look into the next
Mhm.
one, see if it makes sense. And really, if you can, see if you can start locally, see if you can refine your product concept a little bit locally before you go
Mhm.
out into the bigger, greater world. Sometimes it doesn't work, right? Sometimes there's just a chance of kid safety apps. America is a super solid market.
Yeah.
UK needs this market, right? Bulgaria needs this market. A lot of
Mhm.
different countries need these kid safety products, and they're not into it yet. And maybe you got to look into it and say, well, why isn't it? Right? You can do some case studies and go for it. And sometimes it's just better to say, hey, I'm going to invest a certain amount of money. I'm going to try it out and see if it works. Investing in emerging markets is way riskier than investing in your local market. The returns are higher, the
Mhm.
risk is also higher, right? So judge your personal ability to handle that risk. And if you are trying to make or break it, if it's a make or break situation for you, I would be cautious, right? If you're a person that can handle bankruptcy or going without money for a while, right? Okay, cool. But
Mhm.
if you're married with kids and you have to be that provider, judge for yourself, is it worth the risks? Because there's nothing worse in a family than having
Absolutely.
lost money of your family, of your friends, of your nest egg, and then
Mhm.
come to realize, I should have done it different. It's a hard way to learn. It's a good way to learn, but it's hard. I don't
Well,
recommend it.
you're absolutely right about that. The other question is, what are the key indicators you look at for investing in an emerging market?
I look to see if my target customer segment can afford the product. If it's a
Okay.
large enough segment with a large enough population and demographic that I'm going to be able to market to them, in an affordable way, and if they're going to be able to afford this product in the first place. I want to make
Right.
sure that I can hopefully get, this is just a round number, right? But I want to make sure that I can probably get 10 times my return out for my
Mhm.
investments, right? And how long is it going to take me? Do I think it's going to take me a year or 5 years or 20 years to do it, right? If it's going to take me 20 years to make my money back, that's not a business, that's a charity, right? So look at how long it takes to get the money back. Make sure if, first of all, see, if money's your KPI, right? Sometimes it's
Mhm.
influence, sometimes it's spiritual, right? Try to make sure you understand how you're getting paid. Sometimes you're getting paid from NGOs. Sometimes you're getting paid from the profitability app or advertisers, right? See what it is that is your value proposition and your revenue streams.
Definitely. You're absolutely right about it. What are some common pitfalls investors should avoid when entering emerging markets?
I think the biggest common pitfall is to expect that they're going to have the same culture as you and
Uh-huh.
that you understand the market in the first place. If it's an emerging market, it's safe to expect that you don't understand it at all. That's how I go into it. I'd be like,
Mhm.
there's a reason it's an emerging market and not a stable market. Why is it? Why is it that I am so lucky to have this deal, this opportunity to make a huge return? Why can other people do it, right? Where did other companies fail? Almost guaranteed other companies have tried to do business in that country and have not performed well. Nigeria recently kicked out France and welcomed Russia, right? What's recently trending? Does that benefit me? Does it go against me? Right? How do I take advantage of the moment? And how quickly can I get my return back to make that risk make sense?
All right. And there's one more question that I'm gonna ask. How important is it to understand the local culture and social dynamics when investing in an emerging market?
I think that depends on the cost of producing your product.
All right.
If you can go into the market and experiment
Mhm.
without significant cost, then you can, and you have the financial ability to experiment with it through advertising, through creating a quick MVP, getting it out there,
Exactly.
right? Same concepts I recommend, anyways. If you can do
Mhm.
that, great. If you have to, if there's a big risk of failure and a large cost, then you want to step back. And also, there's one risk I didn't express. If you're trying to go into a market segment, and this could be any market segment, emerging or culturally, and there's a risk that's going to alienate your existing customer base or
Exactly.
your industry, or to give legal problems or
Mhm.
brand problems that are going to affect you in the future, you want to be more cautious. If that's the case, go into a little slower, do some more case studies, see how it's going to apply. Maybe go through a prototype rich approach to seeing if it makes sense. It all
Mhm.
depends on what your goals are and what your ability to handle risk is.
Well, those are some great answers. Well, as we conclude, do you have any final thoughts for or any advice for our audience?
Certainly. So diversification is going to be critical to spread your investments across different regions and sectors. So engage with local experts, right? Don't be afraid to ask for insights, to ask questions, to talk to people, and consider hedging currency risks. I've talked a lot about the risk of inflation and fluctuations in currencies,
Mhm.
but look at your local value proposition and say, hey, is the US dollar really as strong as I think? Is the euro or the ruble as strong as I think? Would it potentially benefit me from taking what I've already done and going into new
Mhm.
markets, making small twists, maybe making a new application that's targeting this culture in this market, and to see
Okay.
if I can diversify my risks through expanding, right? These are huge value gains when going into market segments, new market segments. So just stay updated on politics and economic developments, and see how you can help anticipate and mitigate risks, and also remember your mission, right? Why did you make this app in the first place? How are you helping the world? And are you making a legacy that will be further enhanced by helping more people, right? I know
Mhm.
we almost all of the projects we work on, like 80%, there's a mission behind it. There's a humanitarian drive to make the world a better place, right? And the client has this concept and this business practice that makes better lives for people. How can you go out there and make the world a better place and be excited about it?
Well, those were some great advice. Thank you so much, Philip, for sharing your insights. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope you found this session really valuable for you. Don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook for more content on personal development, business strategy, and effective communication. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Ciao.